Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a video about the downfall of NASCAR gaming. In this video, we're going to run through the four major developers we've had in modern times, meaning from 1999 forward. EA being the first one from 1999 until about 2009, followed up by Technics. They technically took over the license in 2010, I believe, but their first game wasn't until 2011, and they released games themselves until 2014. NASCAR 15, although it was a Technics game, was released by 704 Games, so I have them slated from 2011 to 2014. After Technics obviously comes 704 Games, which we will discuss, and following them, they were bought out by Motorsports Game, which everyone knows what everyone thinks about them, and we will get to them as we go. But let's get started first with EA. I wrote down the prime years for each game developer when the games they were releasing were at their prime. Now, EA is the different one in this statistic, where it was early on that they created their better videos. 1999 to 2006 were the prime years for EA gaming, especially with the NASCAR racing series. NASCAR 2001 was a very innovative game for its time, followed up by NASCAR 2002. Primarily NASCAR 2003 Thunder was a very popular game at the time, very immersive in its career mode, but NASCAR 2004 held a bar that no game ever really met as far as the development of your team. Was a really good game, definitely in the prime years. 2005 Chase for the Cup was a personal favorite of mine. Although it lacked some of the team development depth, it did have the depth of starting from a modified and racing your whole way up through the series. 2006 Total Team Control, that game was very similar to 2005, except it had more team aspect to it, where you could actually switch cars, kind of like how you could switch players in Madden. You could switch cars on your team to help each other out, to try to get the whole team a better finish. However, after 2006 Total Team Control, things began to go downhill for EA. NASCAR 2007 was basically, like a refresh of 2006, but somehow they made it worse. 2008 and 9, they tried debuting a new engine, and it just was a complete disaster. The physics weren't really that great. The graphics were actually decent in 09, I'll say, but the games really weren't that good, and they won't hold up well in time. 2009 was the last major game that EA made, although they did make a go-kart racing game for the Wii afterwards. After 2009, Technics picked up the NASCAR contract. 2011, NASCAR the game 2011, I should say, was not a very good game. Was it a good first stone in the process of building a good game? I guess. I mean, the AI in the Technics years were always horrible, and that's the reason why I called 2011 terrible year on my notes for Technics and NASCAR gaming, because NASCAR 2011 was just such a disaster. As far as the complete lack of depth, the AI being horrible, the benefit of it was the graphics, really. But afterwards, they did have some mediocre years where they made some relatively decent games. NASCAR 2012 and to 2014. You had the Inside the Lines in there, too. Those were actually pretty good games. Now, the reason, as I mentioned earlier, where NASCAR 15 is not included, was technically that was released by Dusenberry Martin, which became 704 Games. NASCAR Inside the Line had a lot of depth and ownership, kind of almost similar to 2004. The issue was the bugginess of the game. Now, it was great how it had so much ownership in the series, but the AI in that gaming series was really bad, and that added up over time to create a bad game experience overall. And 14 carried that on, where they did update the graphics a little bit, and Technics, their graphics always are honestly some of the best that NASCAR games ever saw, especially on PC. The honest downfall of their games graphically, and this will sound dumb, but it's honestly really important, was their catch fence. Their catch fences were 2D, just pasted textures. If they were 3D, the game would have been ungodfully beautiful, which would have been really cool. So, that's something cool to keep in mind. But that pretty much closes it out for the Technics years before we roll on in to the 704 Games era, where we started out with NASCAR Heat Evolution. Now, NASCAR Heat Evolution was a dumpster fire. However, that game actually successfully built a base for an indie-style game. The reason I called it an indie-style game was the graphics in the NASCAR Heat series were never really that great. Once they got to NASCAR Heat 4, they finally figured out how to make, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 style graphics, but they never really got it down to making high-grade graphical games. But Heat Evolution at least put a base in for the setups in the cars and the series, and they were able to build off that and lead up to NASCAR Heat 2, which was a better game, but they kind of slowly progressed the whole way through. So while they started out bad, they actually picked up pace, kind of how Technics did. So most game developers tend to start out pretty poorly. 704 Games did as well. So Heat 2 came out. That game, same graphical anomalies. It was very bad anisotropic filtering, very pixelated, no motion blur. The textures weren't that great. The environmental factors weren't that great. The shadowing, the shading, the fog, everything was bad. But they added the truck in the Xfinity Series, and it was the first time that had been in a NASCAR game since 2007, which a lot of people were asking for, and it was a great thing that they actually introduced that. And that then led to NASCAR Heat 3, which added more prominent features to the career mode, including a little bit of a more in-depth team ownership, which was a great thing to add because people love to have that sort of thing in their NASCAR games. However, the graphics continued to stay around the same. While they did tweak some things and they added more tracks, they added the Dirt series as well. It didn't really hold a flame to NASCAR games of the past graphically. However, a lot of howevers in this video. NASCAR Heat 4, that was probably one of the best NASCAR games in recent memory, as far as the graphical improvements of it. Now, it was plagued by the same bugs that the developers couldn't fix because NASCAR has had a bad luck streak of having incompetent developers and especially incompetent project managers. NASCAR Heat 4, while plagued by bugs, graphically was a lot better and held a flame to maybe just a fresh day of release when the Xbox One came out racing game. It wasn't like Forza graphics or anything, but it would have been a very highly rated graphical game on the Xbox 360 and about mid-range and a high-level indie game on the Xbox One, which is a great thing for the game. Followed up, though, by NASCAR Heat 5, which technically we are now entering into the motorsports game era. We're not going to call it an era, we're going to call it an era. Where they took over, they bought out 704 Games. They lied to a lot of people to get there, but we will do another video on that at some point. They released NASCAR Heat 5, which ended up literally just being fresh paint schemes and a roster update, which was basically nothing. And they were supposedly developing NASCAR 21. NASCAR Heat 5 was a disappointment, however, because it did not fix a single bug. Every bug was still in the game that was in it before. The only thing they attempted to add, which was a better statistics tracker, was completely broken and barely worked. And it was basically there as was, and they just chose to tear it apart and ruin it. So that's kind of the motorsports game logic. They just kind of destroy everything they touch. However, supposedly what they were telling everyone at this time was you were basically buying that game to get the money for NASCAR 21. Now, it turns out this game developer overpays their CEO and hemorrhages money like no one's business, which led to problems with the game. NASCAR 21 was released and it is easily probably the worst NASCAR game to ever be released. And that's saying something. NASCAR Heat Evolution was horrible. NASCAR 11 was horrible. NASCAR 2009 was horrible. NASCAR 21 makes those games look like AAA titles. When NASCAR 21 was released, they didn't have stages, which at that point were a prominent part of NASCAR. The AI is basically not possible to race with, and they have no logic to them. While they have improved the game through updates over time, it is easily one of the most bland games. And the contract they signed with NASCAR is to release yearly titles, and we're now entering into 2023, looking at the second consecutive year of no new NASCAR main title release. While they did release NASCAR Rivals on the Nintendo Switch, they did not get around to releasing a new NASCAR title on console. The primary consoles, talking PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One, and Series X. So many different names for those Xboxes now, it can be hard to keep track of them. I am an Xbox guy, don't hate. But that was just the downfall of NASCAR gaming, really, was you just fell all the way to motorsports game. That was running over the history of it, but you can basically tell you had like your bloop through the AEA years from 99 to 2006, where the games got really good. From 2007 to 2009, they had a downfall. Technics 2011 was even worse. Technics 2012 to 14 in some ways were worse than 2007 and 2009. However, I will say, Technics had the best physics of any NASCAR game to come out ever. They nailed the physics and the graphics. They just had horrible AI and game bugs. But overall, you can say they were a little bit worse than the ones before. The 704 games led a temporary boost in the gaming industry, although Heat 4 was, at that point, basically the worst game to come out. Sorry, not Heat 4. Heat Evolution was basically, at that point, the worst game to ever come out in the NASCAR series. But it was improved as they went along, up until Heat 4. And then Heat 5 was kind of where it started going downhill again. And that little minor bloop that improved things almost to levels of 2000 and the mid-2000s ended up collapsing to the lowest level yet with NASCAR 21 with motorsports games. Motorsports games tends to be the death of everything they touch, and they make the future of NASCAR gaming questionable. That'll be in the next episode of covering the future of NASCAR gaming. It's a sad thing the way the downfall of NASCAR gaming has transpired. NASCAR gaming has always been a really important thing to the NASCAR community, for people getting an idea of what it feels like to be in those cars, especially in an arcade sense and not in a simulation sense. While it's important for these games to have authentic physics, that was one of the complaints with NASCAR Heat, was that the games lacked authentic physics. Now, I'm not talking simulation physics, we're talking authentic physics. Like, I'm doing a series right now on NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup. The physics are arcade, but they are authentic, and they do feel right. And they do give you a little bit of a feel for what it should feel like. Heat Evolution completely failed at that, and that's a really important thing to have. However, what they did right was the online, which they had the best online gaming for a racing game ever. I think they literally had the best online racing experience for any game that's ever been released. The fact that they could fit so many people in one server around the tracks without issues and get it going was an amazing feat for them to accomplish, and I will give them credit for that. And one thing you can actually kind of hold to heart at this point, although many people, including myself, were excited when 704 Games was bought out, NASCAR gaming would have been better off if Motorsports Game had never bought 704 Games, and they continued to just slowly improve NASCAR Heat. Because if the 704 developers were in charge going into NASCAR Heat 5, it would have had some bug tweaks, and it would have had the roster update as well. But the bug tweaks would have been the big thing. Because NASCAR Heat, with the 704 games, they would do a big game, a patch, a big game, a patch, and then a big game. Now, I will say, Heat 2 is kind of a big leap, but it held pretty much everything from Heat Evolution. They pretty much just added a couple tracks and a couple new cars. Heat 3 actually adjusted the physics and added a lot of stuff, which was good. But anyways, that was kind of the stepping stones for 704 Games, and the way they improved it, at this point, we would probably have a Heat game that was really, really good. And I wouldn't be shocked if they would have added modifieds by this point. The physics would have at least been improved, because they did tweak them year by year and made them a little bit better as we went along. The sounds would have been a lot better. But we are where we are with motorsports games. The potential end of NASCAR gaming as we know it. And already is the end of NASCAR gaming as we know it. But as I said, that'll be something we take care of in the next episode. The future of NASCAR gaming. If you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you know every single time I upload. Currently, I'm in the process of creating a NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup Career Mode series, one of the most in-depth career modes in a NASCAR game in history. You start in the modifieds, work your way up to the trucks, through the Xfinity Series, into the Cup Series. All of them had different names back then. Nextel, National, which was actually Busch. Craftsman's back, so the trucks are called the same thing. And then the Featherlight Modifieds, which I believe are the Wayland Modifieds now. But that's a series I'm working on, which you guys can check out. I've been reviewing some of the footage. I think it's coming out really well, so I look forward to seeing you guys there. Like I said, see you in the next episode, the future of NASCAR gaming, and let's hope for better days ahead. Until next time.